Welcome to Mrs. E English Skills. I'm Mrs. E and today we're looking at AQA GCSE English Language, Paper 2, Question 4. So let's look at Question 4. This question looks at the whole of Source A and the whole of Source B. It requires you to compare the writer's ideas and perspectives. You will also need to show how the writers convey their ideas and perspectives. So let's look at a sample. For this question, you need to refer to the whole of Source A together with the whole of Source B. Compare how the writers convey their attitudes towards looking after other people's children. In your answer, you should compare their different attitudes, compare the methods they use to convey their attitudes, support your ideas with quotations from the text. As with all questions, the first thing we need to do is to make sure we've fully understood what the question is asking us to do. And in this, we will highlight keywords which will help us answer the question correctly. So for the main bulk of the question, I've just highlighted the keywords that I think will help me keep focused on what the question is asking. So I need to compare, so I need to look at both texts. And I need to make sure I've highlighted the different attitudes that the writers have towards looking after other people's children. So I need to establish what are their attitudes and what are the differences or similarities. Usually with this question, it focuses on different attitudes. So I'll compare these, but the question also has how, compare how the writers convey their attitudes. So this is the methods they use to convey these attitudes. So what are the attitudes and what language or structural devices have they used to show their attitudes? Don't forget that bottom bullet point as well. With every question, bar question 1, we need to support our ideas with quotations from the text. So find evidence highlighted. For example, if the writers used a metaphor to describe what they think and feel about looking after other people's children, then we would pick out that metaphor, write it as a quotation, say it's a metaphor, and then say what attitude this presents for looking after other people's children. The word attitude just means thoughts and feelings, opinions of the writer, and make sure you're focused on the writer. It's not about what you think, it's about what the writers think and how they have shown this through their use of language and structural devices. A good way to answer this type of question is to take a step-by-step approach, as there are several elements you need to make sure you include. So the first thing you have to do is read both texts. And then step 1, establish what the attitudes of the writers are regarding looking after other people's children. For another question, it will be regarding whatever topic they give. So try and identify 3 attitudes for each text and highlight a quote to support each. Step 2, within those quotes, identify the methods used to convey the attitudes and label them. So metaphor, simile, etc. And then step 3, try and explain why those methods are used. So what effect they have. Why have those methods been successful in conveying the attitude of the writer, for example? Once you've got all this information, you can write a point, evidence, explain, extend, answer. This text. This is Source A. It was written by Charlotte Bronte, a famous 19th century author. She was working as a governess, a woman employed to teach and care for the children in a household. And this is an extract from a letter written to her sister in 1839. So this is our 19th century text. Dearest Lavinia, I am most exceedingly obliged to you for the trouble you have taken in seeking up my things and sending them all right. The box and its contents were most acceptable. I have striven hard to be pleased with my new situation. The country, the house, and the grounds are, as I have said, divine. But, alack a day! There is such a thing as seeing all beautiful around you, pleasant woods, winding white paths, green lawns, and blue shining sky, and not having a free moment or a free thought left to enjoy them in. The children are constantly with me, and more riotous, perverse, unmanageable cubs never grew. As for correcting them, I soon quickly found that that was entirely out of the question. They are to do as they like. A complaint to Mrs. Sidgwick brings only black looks upon oneself, and unjust, partial excuses to screen the children. I have tried that plan once. It succeeded so notably that I shall try it no more. I said in my last letter that Mrs. Sidgwick did not know me. I now begin to find that she does not intend to know me, that she cares nothing in the world about me except to contrive how the greatest possible quantity of labour may be squeezed out of me, and to that end she overwhelms me with oceans of needlework, yards of cambric to hem, muslin nightcaps to make, and, above all things, dolls to dress. I do not think she likes me at all, because I can't help being shy in such an entirely novel scene, surrounded as I have hitherto been by strange and constantly changing faces. I see now more clearly than I have ever done before that a private governess has no existence, is not considered as a living and rational being, except as connected with the wearisome duties she has to fulfil. While she is teaching the children, working for them, amusing them, it is all right. If she steals a moment for herself, she is a nuisance. Nevertheless, Mrs. Sidgwick is universally considered an amiable woman. Her manners are fussily affable. She talks a great deal, but as it seems to me not much to the purpose. Perhaps I may like her better after a while. At present I have no call to her. Mr. Sidgwick is in my opinion 100 times better. Less profession, less bustling condescension, but a far kinder heart. As to Mrs. Collins's report that Mrs. Sidgwick intended to keep me permanently, I do not think that such was ever her design. Moreover, I would not stay without some alterations. For instance, this burden of sewing would have to be removed. It is too bad for anything. I never in my whole life had my time so fully taken up. Don't show this letter to Papa or Aunt, only to Bramwell. They will think I am never satisfied wherever I am. I complain to you because it is a relief, and really I have had some unexpected mortifications to put up with. However, things may mend, but Mrs. Sidgwick expects me to do things that I cannot do, to love her children and be entirely devoted to them. I am really very well. I am so sleepy that I can write no more. I must leave off. Love to all. Goodbye. Okay, so we have to establish an overall attitude or a general attitude with regard to looking after other people's children from Bronte. And I hope you'd agree with me that she doesn't seem to like it very much. But we need to highlight specific examples, as I said on the previous slides, and try and label some methods used to show this. So let's have a go. So first of all, we've got the repetition of free, not having a free moment or a free thought. This repetition emphasises the lack of freedom she feels in this role. When she says the children are constantly with me, the verb constantly suggests she feels she gets no respite from the children, and it suggests it's not a positive thing that the children are always there. When we've got the triple of the adjectives riotous, perverse, and unmanageable, this emphasises a distaste for her wards, for the children she looks after, and it also implies they are difficult to look after. And this is emphasised by the use of the metaphor cubs, suggesting they're more animal than they are human. When she talks about Mrs. Sidgwick's black looks upon her if she tries to complain about the children, this, if we look at the connotations associated with the word black, dangerous, evil, cold, this implies a difficult relationship with the parent in this role as well. Then we've got the idea of the workload that she's actually given. So she says the greatest possible quantity of labour may be squeezed out of me. So this hyperbole, exaggeration, shows or suggests there's very little work-life balance. And this is emphasised by the use of the metaphor oceans of needlework. And you can also talk about yards of cambric to hem, muslin night. So the listing of the tasks she has to do in terms of structural feature can also emphasise the workload, and it's not just looking after children, it's everything that comes with it as well that she finds difficult. Okay, then we've got if she steals a moment for herself, she is a nuisance. By using the verb steals is suggesting this is a criminal act. Just having a moment of freedom is actually a criminal act. So the response to this from her employers is quite a harsh response. And at the end there, she talks about how she's expected to do things that she says, I cannot do, and gives the examples to love her children, to be entirely devoted to them. So this really highlights a lack of an emotional bond with her wards, with the children that she looks after. So we've discussed a lot of ideas and attitudes there for Bronte. So let's have a little look at source B. Source B. The following text was written by Monica Albelli, an experienced nanny, and published on the 10th of August 2013 in the Guardian newspaper. It's called Confessions of a Nanny. Being a nanny, whether you're a Mary Poppins, a Nanny McPhee, or a Mrs. Doubtfire, is a very tricky job. You have to be liked by two opposing teams, to which a perfect nanny means completely different things. You must be kind, you must be witty, very sweet, and fairly pretty. If you don't scold and dominate us, we will never give you cause to hate us. This is how the children in Mary Poppins, Michael and Jane, want the newspaper ad for their nanny to read. Their father, Mr. Banks, is keener on discipline. Mrs. Banks seems to believe perfection lies somewhere in between that and the children's ideal. I have always loved children and had a natural ability to connect with them, with ease, no matter their gender, nationality or character. But when you're a nanny, kids come with parents, and parents come with problems, opinions and expectations of their own, often in conflict between themselves. Leslie, a successful publisher, and Brian, a dentist, were Scots in their mid-40s. They worked long hours but seemed to love Therese, 7, Tom, 9 and William, 11. Their approach when it came to the kids' upbringing, though, was completely different from each other. Confident and motivated, Leslie believed her children's time should be spent doing homework, reading books or playing educational games. Brian, cheerful and laid back, wanted us to just have fun. He asked me not to be too strict with the kids, while Leslie kept pressuring me to turn them into responsible and hard-working individuals. I would arrive at their house to find a note from Brian asking me to take them to the park, and then receive a text from Leslie with a to-do list. Then after a while, Brian asked me to ignore what Leslie wanted. We do it too. It's what keeps our family together, he confided. Leslie would often come home late to find the kids already asleep. I'm not a good mum, she once confessed. I'm actually a bit jealous. I think they're starting to like you more than they like me. The kids and I had bonded. Once as I was getting ready to leave, Tom curled around my leg, while Leslie tried to persuade him he had to let me go. They liked having me around so much that they started asking Brian if I could sleep over. Had we bonded too much? Then things changed. Leslie seemed upset about something, and Brian was more and more absent. One day they told me they wouldn't be needing me anymore, as they had decided to get an au pair, who could also help with the house. I knew that wasn't the real reason. They had, I realised, been asking me to become everything they weren't, and as soon as I started to achieve that, they felt threatened. I tried to see it from their point of view. Being a nanny is difficult, but being a parent is even harder. Having a nanny is also hard. A stranger comes into your life and just by being there, unwittingly shifts the dynamics, affects the relationships and agitates the family's balance. I remembered what a friend used to say whenever I shared my frustrations with her. You care too much. It's just a job. Should a nanny be indifferent? See herself as a doctor and treat all family members as her patients, being impartial and never getting emotionally involved? How can Mary Poppins be indifferent? She is cool and funny, strict at times but always caring, the perfect nanny. But she is a fictional character, and so are Mr. and Mrs. Banks, and Michael and Jane. Many dysfunctional families later, I have learnt to care at the same time as keeping a distance, and that there is no such thing as the perfect family, or the perfect nanny. Let's start analysing this text with the Bronte text in our mind so we can compare for similarities and differences. So are there any similarities? Well, they both agree that being a nanny is hard. Alberley uses the adjectives tricky and difficult to describe the job. She also mentions conflict with parents, which is similar to Bronte, when she uses the triple, parents come with problems, opinions and expectations of their own. And she also describes the contrast in their parents' approach to looking after the children, with Brian wanting them to just have fun, whereas Leslie pressuring me to turn them into responsible, hard-working individuals. So let's look at some differences then. Well, the main difference, I hope you've noticed, is that Alberley loves children and has created an emotional bond that Bronte was unable to create or didn't want to create. We can see this with the verb loved, I've always loved children, and the image of Tom curled around her leg. And also, Alberley uses rhetorical questions to question this emotional bond. So, had we bonded too much? But how can Mary Poppins be indifferent? It implies that she's shocked that there could be a negative consequence to bonding too much with the children that she's looking after. However, this conflict is described by the use of dialogue. When Leslie says, I'm actually a bit jealous, I think they are starting to like you more than they like me. And her friend saying you care too much. So this idea that should a nanny care deeply for the children that they look after, in terms of this Alberley text, it results in her dismissal due to this as a consequence. So we can see lots of differences, but we can also see some similarities there with the views and attitudes expressed by Bronte and Alberley. So now we've analysed both texts, it's time to write an answer. You can use this basic scaffold to get you started if you're stuck. Both writers have blank views regarding looking after other people's children. Bronte thinks or feels blank. We can see this in the quote blank. This, insert method, metaphor, simile, etc., suggests blank. However, or similarly, or whereas. So those are our comparison words. So pick one. Alberley thinks or feels blank. We can see this in the quote blank. This, again, insert a method, suggests blank. Let's look at a more detailed scaffold. So, firstly, step 1, write a signpost sentence comparing the two viewpoints. For example, both writers agree that being a nanny is hard, however their reasons differ. Then step 2, make a point about source A. For example, Bronte emphasises a lack of work-life balance. Then step 3, quote the text, and this needs to be related to the point you've just made. So for example, when stating the children are constantly with her, then step 4, identify the technique that's being used, the method or the tool, the adverb constantly. Step 5, analyse the impact of the particular technique that's being used. To do this, you can zoom in on particular words or phrases within the quote. For example, implies she feels she gets no respite from the children and also indicates distaste for the proximity. And step 6, compare this with source B. So compare and contrast the ideas between the text. For example, whereas in source B, Albally agrees that being a nanny has its challenges by using adjectives such as tricky and difficult to describe the job. However, it is not due to the proximity of the children, as she conveys her natural ability to connect with children and describes how she has always loved them, suggesting being around children is a positive thing. Write at least 4 comparison paragraphs if you can, to make sure you've written enough for the amount of marks that you are given for this question. So the highest amount of marks you can get, as you know, is 16. So we can't just write, a smaller answer, a 2 or 3 paragraph answer, which you could get away with in questions 2 and 3. Okay then, let's look at some sample answers. Sample answer 1. Both writers think that looking after children is hard. Bronte describes her job as a burden, which suggests that it's hard. Monica Albally calls being a nanny tricky and difficult. However, the two writers are different about why they think it's hard. Bronte doesn't like being asked to love somebody else's children, and she says she cannot do it. Albally finds it hard not to bond too much with their children. The writers are also different because Albally likes looking after other people's children, but Bronte doesn't. She says it's riotous. Albally's friend says, "You care too much," showing that Albally does care about her work. Obviously, this is only one comparison, and in order to write a full answer, you'd want to write 3 to 4. But for the purpose of this video, what grade do you think this point or this comparison would get? Pause the video here to have a go before I reveal the examiner's comments. Okay, let's look at the examiner's comments. This is a grade 4 to 5 response. The answer gives some similarities and differences between the attitudes of the two writers. These are identified and supported by some relevant quotes. However, the quotes aren't analysed to explain the writer's methods or tools, and some quotes, such as riotous, are used inaccurately. The comparisons aren't always explained clearly, especially in the final sentence. Sample answer 2. Bronte's letter suggests that she feels limited and confined by the duties involved in looking after other people's children. She refers to her wards as being constantly with her. Bronte's choice of adverbs suggests that she gets no respite from the children. It also indicates that she resents this constant imposition and does not think it's fair that she's expected to be so involved in the children's lives. Albally indicates a similarly close proximity to her wards. The image of the young boy curled around her leg is a symbol of the closeness between them. However, she uses rhetorical question to suggest that this closeness is desirable, which challenges negative attitudes such as Bronte's. She questions how can Mary Poppins be indifferent, to suggest that nannies should aim to be close to children in their care, even whilst maintaining some degree of professional detachment. Again, this is only one comparison, but in terms of a comparison, what grade do you think this would get? Pause the video here again, just to have a go at grading this before I reveal the answer. Okay, let's look at the examiner's comments. So this is a grade 7 to 8. The answer makes interesting detailed points about the writer's points of view, comparing them confidently and fully explaining the methods or tools that each writer uses. It also supports each point with useful, precise quotes. What do you think? Hopefully those two samples have given you an idea of the expectations for this type of question, but again I must stress you need to write more than one comparison. Aim for 4, at least 3, and write it in the step-by-step method that I've shown you in this video to ensure you cover all aspects of the question and everything that's required within it. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Don't forget to check out my other videos to keep improving your English, particularly my basic skills playlist, to make sure your spelling, punctuation, grammar and all that good stuff is correct to help your quality of answer, as with the GCSE exams or with most exams you will be handwriting your answers, so you want to get that right as well. As ever, leave a comment below if you've got a question and I'll endeavour to answer as soon as possible. Thank you to my subscribers and all my new subscribers as well. I'm actually quite overwhelmed by how many I've got in the past few weeks. It's really empowering. It allows me to carry on doing this, something that I love to do, sharing my passion for English with, the world, I suppose. So I'm Mrs. E, and I'll see you soon.